Hello, welcome to VR Roundtable, episode 109. My name is Gary and I'm joined by Anthony, Steve and Chris. We're going to be here for the next hour and a half or so, talking about some VR, the latest VR news and a few games as well. Thank you to everyone joining us in chat, and thank you for downloading this podcast if you're an audio listener. Just to make a quick comment, on the chat, it is super chat. So if you want to make a donation to the show, feel free to do that as well. It's always appreciated, of course. But I guess let me go over to Steve first. Steve, how are you this week?
I am doing good. I'm on a new installation of Windows, everyone. So, I mentioned last week when discussing Pimax that I wanted to do a fresh wipe of Windows to see how everything went. So if there are issues with the stream or with anything, kindly let me know. Don't badger me. There's only so much I think I'll be able to fix while live. So keep that in mind. I'm hoping I got everything set up, but it's actually a pretty daunting task to make sure all the work and all the evolution that you do over the weeks and months from show to show to make sure that transfers over to a new Windows install. I probably could have done a better job there. So if there's any issues, let me know.
Yeah, good stuff. Chris, how are you this week?
I'm doing good. Starting to work on my production teams again. In college, we have this production team thing. So this week we're working on an RPG kind of roguelike thingy, and we have to make a prototype each week. And next week we're going to try to do some kind of VR party game. So I'm looking forward to developing in VR for the first time, hopefully.
Cool. Yeah, you'll have to let us know how that goes as well.
Yeah, you guys will play test, hopefully.
Yeah. Anthony, how are you this week?
I'm good. Everything's fine. Didn't sleep a wink last night, but other than that, I'm great.
Oh, dear.
It won't hit me until the afternoon, and then I'll be like, damn.
Yeah, you've got this show, and then you've got your show to do straight after as well. So you've got to remain... You need those coffees, don't you? You need to get a few coffees in you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I've been playing a lot of Elite this past week. I played with Flute Roger, who's in the chat last night. We played a little bit of multiplayer Elite. Had a great time in there. He's a lot more experienced than I am, but it was good. It was really good just to experiment with different things in Elite and try something else out. But I won't be talking about that in games. We've got a few different games to discuss later on. But first, let's go through the news. The first news story we've got down here, and this is a little bit of speculation on behalf of The Verge. There was an article that came out of The Verge saying that Microsoft could possibly be announcing HoloLens 2 at Mobile World Congress in February. So they have a conference booked in for the 24th of February at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And the speculation from the Verge article, they don't really give too much concrete, honestly, on why they have this impression, but they seem pretty confident that this is going to happen at this event. And part of the reason is Alex Kipman, who works at Microsoft and was quite heavily involved with the production of the original HoloLens and is also involved in VR and AR at Microsoft as well. He will be attending Mobile World Congress. So that sort of points to the fact they may be possibly announcing something. And there is a rumor that this new headset will have a wider field of view. It will be lighter, more powerful, using an ARM-based chip, the Snapdragon 850 this time. So all of these things are yet to be confirmed. But I think the HoloLens, because it's been around for so long now, I think everybody's ready for the next stage and to see what they've done over the past few years in terms of AR. Anthony, you're a fellow AR fan as well. What do you think of this news story? Do you think there's anything behind it? And what would you like to see in HoloLens 2?
Yeah, so they seem incredibly confident about it, which to me says they know this is going to be HoloLens 2, but it's unofficial. Like they have somebody in Microsoft that is like, yeah, this is going to be HoloLens 2, but we can't say anything. I'm thinking that has to be it. But yeah, I'm excited for it just from the standpoint that, Microsoft, we got to remember they were basically the first out the gate, right, in this whole AR thing. And I remember when they showed HoloLens off like way, way back in the days, it was like at Xbox, it was at the E3 show, like they would give a demo of it. And this was before it was even into VR, I think, right? Or somewhere around there, they were showing off HoloLens and they were showing off Minecraft in HoloLens, and they had like a little brief Halo experience in HoloLens. I remember Jeff Gersman talking about it on Giant Bomb. Like they went into some E3 demo and they got a really brief Halo experience that was in HoloLens. And that was all a long time ago. And ultimately, HoloLens, the first one, is not a consumer-based product, but I think Microsoft was pretty smart about it. They knew that it wasn't going to be consumer-based, where we look at somebody like Magic Leap, and it seems like they really thought their Magic Leap 1 was going to be a lot more consumer-based than it probably can possibly be. And Microsoft was a little more down to earth about that situation. But I'm looking forward to this because this is generation 2 of their inside out tracking. And they've had a crack at inside out tracking. They have it out there. They have it in their HoloLens. They have it in all the Windows mixed reality headsets. And I've said it a million times, but I really believe like when a company makes a first attempt at something, I'm not super excited about their first attempt because I always feel like they're going to come up short. Like they're going to learn things and it's going to fall short. And then the second attempt, they learn all their lessons from their first attempt. And so I think the tracking is going to be better. Hopefully it's going to be a bit smaller and less bulbous in nature, a little bit going back to the Magic Leap style. We've got rumors that we're going to get to later in the show about Facebook and other companies that are getting involved in this area. And the, rumors suggest that, they might be smaller. And so I think Microsoft kind of wants to get away from a big, large headset. This is supposedly using a Snapdragon 850, which seems to be almost like a specialized chip that, because we hear about the 845, the 855, this is the 850. So I don't know, is this like a special Snapdragon that they've kind of worked specifically for this product or for a smaller window of products? I'm not sure. But yeah, and the timing is right. We heard that HoloLens 2 was coming in 2019. This is mid to late February 2019. I think the timing's right to get it out there.
Yeah. Just on that point of the Snapdragon 850, I wondered about that too. I wondered if there was some kind of typo in the Verge article or something like that, whether it is the 855. Chris, what do you think of this? In terms of AR, we've all sort of, I'm very interested in the future of AR as well as VR. What's your overall opinion of AR and what do you think of the HoloLens 2?
Yeah, I mean, like all of us, AR is really the exciting future where you can have the VR experience. If you just like pop like a blocker in front of your eyes or something, then you're in VR and they just kind of work together is hopefully what we'll get to. I really don't think about Microsoft enough in the AR VR space. I probably should because, like we've been saying, the HoloLens was kind of one of the first cracks at AR and it's still going strong after all this time. So it's really exciting to hear, that hopefully we'll have improved field of view and, like you said, Anthony, lighter, easier, hopefully more comfortable, things like that. That's all good things that'll help it because there's really real world applications that exist today. If you think about there's a lot of companies using these HoloLenses for different things already. So I think the market's there and Microsoft knows that even if, it's a little bit better, it's not hopefully it'll be a lot better, but even if it's just a little bit better, I think enough companies would want to upgrade to it anyway. I looked it up and the 850 actually does exist. And the cool thing that I saw about it is it looks like it is capable of running on a Windows 10 PC, which, makes sense. That's cool that it can run on Windows 10. And it looks like it's been in some laptops recently. But hopefully that has enough power. It sounds like it does. I mean, all these Snapdragon processors are in the Oculus Quest and the Oculus Go, so they'll have decent power. So I think that's, a good direction as well. It's exciting to see what this will be. I can't wait for this announcement. It sounds pretty confirmed, so I'm hoping we see some cool stuff.
Yeah, the other thing on what you touched on there, Chris, as well, is the fact that a few weeks ago we did report on the story about the US military Microsoft winning a contract for HoloLens headsets with the US military. So, I think that they're seeing a lot of interest in this, and I'm sure that as they progress with it, the field of view on this one is rumored to be 60 degrees, I believe, compared to, I think it was 45 degrees with the original HoloLens. So I suppose that's quite a significant upgrade. It's still not really enough to make it compelling overall, I would say, but it's interesting to see where they go with this stuff. Steve, what do you think of HoloLens 2?
I don't think too much of it. I haven't really tried to analyze it and think, what is this going to mean? Because I still think it's mostly sort of in the dev kit space. Like, it's cool. Like, evolution's great. Like, but I don't know that it's going to greatly impact me. I don't know that, I'm going to be in the market for a HoloLens 2 or anything. I don't think anything's necessarily coming to us as a consumer. And that's the angle that I care about the most relative to me, of course. So, I'll just, it'd be interesting. I'll follow it. I'll kind of see what they're announcing and things like that, but I'm not going to, be overly worried and really thinking that it's going to be something that I'm going to ever have in my hands.
Okay, yeah, and that's a good point, because this is all sort of future technology, isn't it? We know that AR, consumer-based AR glasses, smart glasses, are not necessarily ready just yet, and we're probably going to be waiting another 5 years before we get anything significant in that space. But it's interesting to see where they go and how they progress with this technology. And leading on from that, actually, we do have this report from Road to VR, and this was to do with C-Real 3D's lightfield display. This was a report from Ben Lang, I think, on Road to VR, which he saw this demo of this device at CES, and it's being developed by CERN engineers, and this device, it's very, very early days with this kind of thing. It's not a wearable or anything like that, but it looks to be some kind of device where some kind of microscope or something like that, where you put your eye in and you can focus on different things. So we all know, I wanted to quickly go back to Introduction to Lightfields that we all experienced last year from Google. So light field capture is something that's been done numerous times, and we've all experienced it in our VR headsets, where they can capture a static scene, and yet it captures it in a way where the light is sort of dynamic. So if you experience a scene in VR, you have this experience where the light moves around. When you move your head, you get a different point of view of the light, and it makes a scene not far less static than it actually otherwise would be. Rather than being paused in time, it feels like you're standing in a room which is actually moving through time, but it's just not moving. It's just the state of how it is. We've seen other experiences like the Hallelujah experience, where they had light field capture, and as you move your head, it's not a 360 video. As you move your head from side to side, you actually get the stereoscopic effect, and you get a realistic impression of where you are actually positioning your view. So that's light field capture, which has been sort of proven, and we've experienced it in VR. This is a light field display, which actually takes all of this kind of stuff, but then it displays it in a way where it's not using eye tracking or anything like that. The light field display emits light at certain angles so that you can focus on certain parts of a scene, and it will focus accordingly. So there's no eye tracking. It's not following the position of your eyes to then change the rendering of that particular point, and either blur it or focus it in the way we've seen in some other technology. This is actually using a more natural method of doing sort of focus. And it looks pretty interesting. I guess like all of this kind of stuff, we really need to experience it firsthand. But the thing that gets me excited by this is the fact that Ben Lang at Road to VR was so excited. It was his enthusiasm that he wrote about in that article that made me excited. And when you look at the video, which we're showing now, you can see that there's a lot behind this, and it's not ready yet. It's a long way away, but it's interesting to see again all of the future of this kind of technology. Chris, I'll go over to you first on this. It's difficult for me to describe this because I don't fully understand it myself. I'm trying to read as much as I can about this stuff, but it seems to be that the light is focused from this display because it's entering your eye at different angles, and that's what allows your eye to focus more naturally on this kind of display. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess easiest way to describe it is like it's just how you're used to it in the real world, right? Like light bounces off an object, reflects into your eye, and you see the depth, and you can see all this stuff. Right now it's a pretty rough way of doing it. Like we can't even focus on stuff up close in like the Rift or the Vive or anything like that yet. So it's always cool to hear about light field. It's like that one word that is so confusing when you hear it, because like nobody really knows what it is. They just know it's really cool, and it is definitely the future. Like I remember, hearing about the Avant Glyph, which is kind of light field display. It was like kind of the first one to be that, and it was only like a 720p like headset where you can watch your personal movies, but like you don't see any screen door on it, and it looks like it's 4K almost, just because of the way that the light is reflecting into your eyes. So like that was really cool. When I heard about that, I'm like, wow, I hope that goes into VR. And I know Avagon is also working on trying to add light field into VR and stuff like that. So I hope they succeed with that. It seems like their tech is a lot more miniaturized, but hopefully similar capabilities. Probably not as lifelike as this. This sounds like they're getting super close. But it does sound like everyone is racing towards light field in one way or another, whether that's on the display side or the camera side, which is also super interesting. Both are important, I think.
Yeah, this Anthony, I'll go over to you next on this, because this sort of goes hand in hand with the previous story in terms of AR. This could be applied to not just VR headsets, but also AR as well. The technology from the video looks great, but when you see the picture of this device in its current form, it's not practical in terms of a wearable or anything like that. What do you think of the future? How far away are we from getting this kind of device on our heads?
Yeah, I don't know. The one thing I'll say is I've seen the videos that See Real 3D has, and like one of the founder guys is, he's talking about it, and he's like, what if you could just have little glasses? He talks about, just little glasses on your face, and I'm like, but he keeps talking about VR, and then he keeps talking about these little glasses on your face, and I'm like, wait a minute, what are you talking about here? Are you talking about VR or AR? Because you're kind of like talking about these little glasses are going to do all this magic. And then, yeah, you do see the big giant contraption that they're using right now. One thing I did read about this, that guy, Carl Guttag, we've talked about him a number of times before. He, like during the whole Magic Leap thing, when Magic Leap was an unknown commodity, this guy, Carl Guttag, I might be mispronouncing his last name, but he would be in the Magic Leap subreddit, and he kind of knows his stuff. It's pretty obvious he knows his stuff, and he makes a lot of comments on this stuff. And he said that a couple, not this last CES, but I think the CES prior to that, 2018 January CES, he actually saw this behind closed doors and wasn't allowed to say anything at all about it. And he was really impressed, but it was a very large prototype that they had there. You had to like stick your head into something almost like, the Magic Leap Beast thing that we always heard about. So as far as like, when is light field going to actually come to end-level consumers? One of the problems with it is just pure storage and file size. Is like to get, that's where maybe
5G.
Yeah, again, that's what I was about to say. Exactly. Because how are you going to download, like, imagine if you could download a 1-minute clip of video, but it's 500 gigs. Would you do that? Would you download 500 gigs for a 1-minute clip of video? Because that might be what we're looking at. And I'm just throwing those numbers completely out of my what. But I mean, it might be kind of similar to that for light field. So how, like, people aren't going to download that. It's got to be streamed somehow. So I think the whole infrastructure for light field isn't there. But what I would love to see, you said, like, one of the things you mentioned, Gary, is we've all seen light fields. I actually didn't, because back when that Google light field thing came out, my computer just didn't run it. I should try it now that I've got a decent computer to do it. I should retry it. But I haven't actually seen it. And what I've always wanted to see is, give us a sample, even if it's like 5 seconds and we got to download 250 gigs. I want to see what it really, really, really looks like. But maybe it's just our headsets right now, the resolution and everything. So it might be wasted on it. Like, do you feel like you've really seen a light field?
It's difficult because the capture of it is one thing, and then as Chris said, it's the display, and that's where this particular news story sort of is saying that this is the display of seeing the light fields in the way that they should be seen. So you can capture it in a natural way, but when you're using a VR headset to view those light fields, it's still impressive. I still absolutely loved it, but it's not a natural way of experiencing light fields. So you do the two things do go hand in hand, I think. So if we can get a display and just try a display, I've got nothing to compare it to, so I've got no idea of what this could actually improve upon in terms of what we've seen in VR. But you get the idea that natural focus and a more natural way of light entering your eye is a big deal, at least from this report. Steve, what do you think? Because I remember you tried the introduction to light fields from Google as well, and I think you were quite impressed with that as well. What do you think of this display story?
Well, I think it's a step towards getting your vision to be more natural. And I saw some comments in chat that said, well, I think it was Main Fan said that, well, I don't, I can focus on things up close, and it's not about your ability to focus on things up close in VR. But it's more about it being natural and like real life. Like when you focus on something up close, your eyes behave differently. The way your eyes just literally focus and behave. So having that ability, with a VR headset today, and I guess most AR headsets, there's a singular plane, and having a very depth, or as Oculus mentioned it when they showed the Half Dome prototype, a very focal. So I don't think it will radically change the way we observe and consume any AR or VR content. But what I think will happen is it'll be one step closer to it being natural, one step closer to being, I don't want to say fatigue necessarily, but one step closer to anybody that has fatigue issues. Like it'll just be more natural, plain and simple. We kind of do the same thing with displays and with audio. You go to a movie theater and Dolby Atmos or whatever the latest incarnation is, and they got 57 speakers surrounding you, and it's trying to mimic how your ears naturally hear and such like that. So I think this is in the same sort of similar vein of thinking, but for vision as opposed to audio, and that's all I see about it. So I don't think it's going to be this huge game changer, like when we go to use it, and I'm not trying to downplay it or anything, but I think it's just like I said, just another step towards natural and how our vision and everything works. And I think that's important if we're ever going to have this future, this very futuristic sci-fi future where we're always having augmented technology, in our lives from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. We have some sort of notification system in the corner of our eye, whether it be through glasses or through whatever. I think getting close to natural biological response is important for the long-term viability. So this is the right step. It's just it's sci-fi for geeks right now. Like I don't think it's anything that's going to greatly impact us tomorrow. But 10 years from now, we'll be glad that this research was done.
Yeah, I looked at their website, and man, their roadmap is kind of crazy. So according to C-Real 3D. In 2019, there'll be high quality light field in VR headsets. In 2020, it'll be in MR headsets, and in 2021, it'll be in smart glasses that are like a wearable form factor. That's their current. I feel like they're a little off if they're just showing this in 2019 and it's a giant projector and they want it in VR headsets this year. But whatever. I hope they can get there. That's pretty ambitious.
Yeah, it's I don't know what we'll see from this, but the technology, again, looking further ahead, it's all interesting to keep track of this kind of stuff. Okay, the next news story we've got down here is to do with Apex Construct. So actually, can I go over to you, Anthony, on this one? I think I didn't actually read this one, but I know that it was quite a significant news story in terms of sort of the sales of VR on different platforms.
Yeah, I don't have it pulled up in front of me right now, but basically what happened is the CEO of Fast Travel Games, who are the developers of Apex Construct, was kind of talking about how their sales broke down on that particular game. And so if you go back to, I believe it was May of 2018, he was saying that 54% of their sales were coming from PCVR of their entire sales. And then at the end of 2018, 58% of their total sales are coming from PlayStation VR. So they saw this incredible explosion towards the end of this last year of a lot of people picking up PlayStation VRs, and their sales for Apex Construct exploded on that platform. So right now, at this current point in time, basically almost 60% of their sales are coming specifically from PlayStation VR. Now, one of the things we do have to remember is Apex Construct, when it first released, it was a PlayStation VR exclusive for a short window of time. Similar to Moss and a number of other games, it was like a 45-day window. It wasn't like a really long window of exclusivity. And back then, that's when their sales weren't that incredible on PlayStation VR, and it was much more incredible this fourth quarter. So what it tells us is, I think this gives us like an advance indicator that PlayStation VR had a lot of success this last Christmas. Borderlands 2, Beat Saber, the lower prices, Astrobot, I think all of that combined. And you know, we all have these flat gamers everywhere. We know tons of flat gamers. And what happens is they start hearing a little blurb here. You know, they hear a blurb about Superhot. They hear a blurb about this, a blurb about that. They hear about Beat Saber. Then they hear about this Astrobot. They hear that Beat Saber is now on PlayStation VR. All these things are little seeds that get planted. And I think a lot of people picked up PlayStation VRs this last Christmas. So I believe Sony will announce some pretty big sales. But I think the other major thing that we need to take away from this is imagine all the indie developers worldwide that somehow look at this story and read this story. Guess what, man? There is going to be a tidal wave of ports coming to PlayStation VR, I think. Because I think if you're making a VR game and you can get it running on a base level PlayStation 4 system, you're going to port it over to PlayStation VR, especially after reading a story like this, that 58% of their sales are coming from PlayStation VR. So those of us that are PC-based gamers, you know, maybe this doesn't mean a hell of a lot to you. Well, in one way, it might affect you adversely, because as all these developers start scrambling to port their games over, guess what they're not doing? They're not buttoning up their existing PC VR game that might need a little bit of buttoning up. But it's just an interesting look into the health of the overall industry, I think.
I think it's more for the tweet and everything, the information, I think is more for the consumers and those like us that are following it. I think if you're a developer, I think you're probably pretty aware of the breakdown. You'll have, if you're making a notable game, and I'll use the developers of Beat Saber as an example, because it came to PlayStation VR late. I have to think that people on Shuhei Yoshida's team are knocking at your door, sending you emails saying, "Hey, look at these numbers. On average, games that are multi-platform on PlayStation VR and on PC VR, you know, the biggest bulk of them are selling on PlayStation VR." That's Shuhei Yoshida's job and his team's job. So I think developers are probably already pretty keenly aware of this information prior to Apex Construct developer releasing the info. I think it's interesting, and I'm glad they did. I'm not saying the tweet isn't worth much, because we get, I guess I would have assumed that to be the case anyway, but it's nice to get that kind of confirmation. So it makes sense. There's that many more PlayStation VRs in the wild.
Yeah, because a lot of that stuff is under NDA. Like I went to some Nintendo thing, all NDA, I can't say anything about it. But you know, that's the type of thing that we'll never get to know, is like how people market their inner sales or whatever to developers and things like that. So this is really cool information. Just like makes it so much easier for an indie developer who doesn't know PlayStation to be like, okay, like there is something substantial here. Something also cool is they also said December was one of the best months ever for Apex in general. So it sounds like, you know, the VR industry is like definitely booming a lot. I can just kind of tell that walking around my school here. Like I keep looking at Snapchat, everyone's playing VR, and like, you know, everyone I know has VR now. That didn't happen. You know, no one had VR when I was in here and when like when I joined the podcast. But I mean, I think a lot of people have been jumping in. Like all my friends basically have VR now, which is nuts because, you know, no one had that like this time last year. So I think there's some good momentum here, which is good to see because, you know, there's also been a lot of doomsday articles coming out lately too. So
yeah. I did, before we get on to the next news story, there was a comment in chat which has sparked a little bit of discussion in there as well, from Trey VR, who asked, do you guys think there are too many headsets and the result is confusing the Pancake gamers to join the VR community? This is something that I've thought about as well, from time to time, where you've got a wealth of all this new hardware coming out. It's very comparable. You know, there's not a huge amount of differences in terms of like PC VR headsets, really, for the most part. A vast majority of them are very close in specs, but then you've also got the PSVR, then you've also got the Oculus Go, then you've got Gear VR and Google Cardboard. There's a lot of stuff out there, and if you categorize all of these headsets in one bracket of being VR headsets, I've tried VR, I've tried Google Cardboard, so now I've tried VR, and that's it. You know, it's concerning to me, and I do wonder whether too many headsets are coming out and there's too much hardware, too much confusion in the market. Anthony, what do you think of this?
Yeah, well, if you're like a casual, or if you're a flat gamer looking to maybe dip your toes in the VR waters, you're going to know about Vive and you're going to know about the Rift. And then so if you start looking into the Vive, then you're gonna find out, oh, well, there's this Vive Pro and now there's a Vive Pro I and there's a Vive Cosmos. And so it's going to kind of go into a confusion. And then if you look into the Oculus Rift a lot, you're going to hear about Oculus Quest. And you're like, well, wait a minute, maybe I should be getting one of these Quest things. So yeah, I do think there is a little bit of a concern there where the average person that isn't like really into this stuff is going to investigate a little bit, but as they investigate a little bit, they might get a little bit even more confused, and they might decide, well, I'm just going to wait a little bit until this kind of settles out a little more. So
yeah, it's Steve. So let me go over to you, because I mean, you could make the comparison of smartphones. You know, when smartphones first started to come out, there were so many people jumping on board with that, but they're all, again, very close in spec. Do you think that the consumers that were inundated with a large amount of smartphones at that time, there was any confusion, or did it just overall, was it just a benefit? Is it applied to VR as well?
I think so. I think in part, and we're equally guilty here on the show, we created this platform specific thing. You know, it was like the Vive platform, the PSVR, and the Oculus platform. If you get away from that and think of them as glorified monitors, then, you know, I don't know how many desktop monitors are there. You got some with G-Sync, some with FreeSync, some at 4K, some at 1080p, but 240 hertz. Like you got a lot of variability, but it's just a monitor. So I think VR headsets can kind of get into that sort of status quo, so to speak. If you want to drill down into any device, like you mentioned smartphones specifically, I think you know, for the largest time, and still to this day, I sort of just think of it as Apple and Android. And I know BlackBerry tried to make a resurgence. I know Palm OS tried to make a resurgence at some point, but it was really just Apple and Android. And within Android, you had, you know, your HTC phones, your Samsung phones, and so forth. So I think most people, and it really it's interesting because I'm not sure, but when I think of an what I'll call an uninformed consumer, someone that says, I'm going to go out and buy a headset, how will they do that? Will they go to a store like Best Buy and talk to a sales guy and have the sales guy say, okay, well, this Oculus does XYZ, this HTC Vive does ABC. You'll have those type of people, and then it's really the sales guy. It's no different than when a couple decides to go buy a refrigerator or something. But then you'll have the other type of consumer that'll go to a place like Reddit or somewhere and start getting into the weeds, and they're going to buy their device online. That type of consumer, I think, won't necessarily be confused. They'll do their research, and they may not understand everything they're researching. So, I think it's just a simple matter of, you can get into the weeds on anything. You can get into it on cars, on hell, like I'm just using a personal anecdote. We bought a couple Philips Hue bulbs. I actually got a gift for Christmas, and now it's making me want to expand them in our home. And me and my wife are trying to plan it, and we're like doing a bunch of research to figure out what type of wall switches are compatible. So I think tech is in a spot where end users have to be able to do research and know what product they're buying and what their intended purpose for it is, rather than just willy-nilly buying something, that says VR headset and then hoping it's going to be compatible with their computer and compatible with everything else they have. So it's going to require some research.
Chris, what you were talking about just a few minutes ago about your friends now sort of starting to get into VR, did you help them out which headset to get, or were they all up to speed on it?
Yeah, that's the thing is, it's confusing for them. I mean, everyone knows Rift and Vive, like you said. Like everyone's like, should I get a Vive? I heard room scale's better or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about this. Like, everyone here's on a budget, and like, I feel like the Rift is better in a lot of ways. So I basically convinced everybody to get a Rift. But
shocker.
Hey,
if the
Vive was a better deal, if the Vive was a better deal, I'd recommend it more. But no, it's cool. My roommate out there has a 3-sensor setup, and it's just giant space now. So good for him. But yeah, I think the only problem really lies in the crappy phone ones that are like $10 when you walk into Best Buy and you see like VR like right when you walk in, and it's this really crappy thing. Like that's the only thing I can think of that would kind of turn some people off. But in general, if someone goes to Best Buy, they'll find the Rift and they'll find a sales guy from Oculus, or like just some sales guy who's getting paid to talk about the Rift, and usually that ends up being pretty good. And I think the Rift is the right choice for a lot of people, and I'm glad that Oculus is putting so much marketing into it, so people can think of it first. Like, good thing there's not some crappy headset like the Vive Pro is putting in marketing, and it's everywhere, and everyone thinks they have to buy a Vive Pro or something. I don't know. So like you said, Steve, I think it's just kind of like anything else. You can get in the weeds, but I think it's turning out to be pretty good for PSVR, because someone's like, oh, I have a PlayStation, boom, buying this, or the Rift, where they walk into Best Buy, they see it, they can try it, and they'll buy it. So I think that's, really the two big things. I remember there was like Vive demos, but I haven't seen any. Like, I don't have any nearby me. Maybe they're not doing that as much, but I think the in-store thing is probably the best for general consumers for now. But yeah, it's our job. We got to spread the word and tell people what to get so they don't screw up.
Yeah, it's strange that thing about the demos in store, because now, like going back a year, I remember going to like my local retail stores that would do this kind of stuff, and they would have a demo of HTC Vive set up in the center of the store. Nobody was ever on it. Whenever I went by, nobody was ever on it. But they also had Oculus demos as well. And they said, I tried to get an Oculus Rift demo at the store. I owned an Oculus Rift anyway, but they said you can't do that now because they only come in at the weekend. So you have to wait for that. Yeah, it's crazy to me. But I guess it just comes down to the fact they weren't selling enough to warrant the amount of space they had to dedicate to VR demonstrations, unfortunately. And it's just the sad state of affairs, I'm afraid. But it's
you know what it is, though, is like you can go into a GameStop, right? And they have a thing set up that has a Nintendo Switch right there, and it's all built in, and they don't have to have a chaperone right there. And that's the problem. That it's the wire. And then you can't say, well, Oculus Quest is going to save all of this because there's no wires. Somebody just puts on an Oculus Quest, they're trying it out, and then they take off running, they're gone, But one of the nice things I have seen is that PlayStation, I don't know if you guys have seen any of these photos, but there are these things called malls here in America. They're kind of dying, but they still kind of exist. And PlayStation has actually been going to malls and doing demos at various malls. And that's kind of cool. I hope we could see more of that. And one thought I had in my head is, what if Oculus and HTC, like, what if they had a special program for VR arcades where, do you want to demo a Rift? Do you want to demo a Vive? Go to your local VR arcade. Maybe they could have some kind of kickback where you get like a 30-minute trial at a VR, because the VR arcade is already set up. They already know what they're doing, but they're not going to give somebody a free demo because that's not what they're trying to do. But if Oculus or Vive was giving them some kind of kickback for the demo, and maybe they had to just write down the customer's name and an email or something, things can happen. There's ideas that can be done.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, let's get on to the final news story that we've got down here. And this is to do with the fact that Facebook, they've got a few more changes in their VR and AR departments. I don't know too much about this. Basically, they've moved a lot of people around, and there's not a lot to say other than the fact that they are still sort of moving things around, trying to pin down the right place for all of these people. A few people are staying in the same places, but there seems to be so many changes in Facebook in terms of VR and AR. They do call it sort of VR and AR now. They sort of transitioned. This is something I wanted to get onto in terms of when, like back in 2014, I don't think too many people were really looking at what the future of AR. I think by that time, Magic Leap possibly they announced what they were working on, or there were rumors of something to do with Magic Leap. It might have been 2015. But either way, there was all of this stuff going on around that time. But Facebook seemed to be, with their purchase of Oculus, they seem to be full on in terms of VR. And when you see a company which is really focused on social networking, they are a social networking company. They want to connect people and sell things to people. They want to sell advertising. They want to make money. And they saw VR as being some kind of future in terms of social networking. At least that's what I see. I don't necessarily think they just saw it as a gaming device. I think they always had plans to take this technology that they saw in Oculus and transfer it over slowly to sort of a social networking thing. As we've moved on and we've got things like HoloLens and Magic Leap, I feel like there is a slow transition with Facebook in terms of possibly, and I don't know this for sure or anything like that. It's just my overall impressions of it, that they could potentially be moving their focus away from VR and moving it over to AR. Again, I don't know whether this is the case or not, and it will probably be a mistake for a company like Facebook to ignore AR completely. So I'm sure that would happen. There will be some interest in AR from Facebook anyway. It's just that overall, from what we're seeing in terms of the Oculus Quest, and people were talking about this at the announcement of the Oculus Quest, that they tend to be moving away from something like a high-end PCVR headset, and giving us more of these cut-down versions which have less friction and possibly get more people involved in VR. With that in mind, I think it just makes perfect sense for a company like Facebook, in terms of like their social networking goals, to focus a little bit on AR as well and possibly transition more over to that. Just a few thoughts I've got rolling around my head. Chris, so just going back to this original news story, there are some changes at Facebook, VR and AR. So they're sort of keeping a few things the same, but also a lot of changes there. Have you got any comments on that, but also on what you see in terms of Facebook's future with VR and AR?
Yeah, well, to me, it looks like, just like the monthly reorganization. I'm sure Steve would agree. Companies do that all the damn time, especially companies like Facebook. I'm excited to see someone who launched Portal, which is like a Facebook product you can like buy, invest by, moving to Oculus, because hopefully he can help organize it and get the Quest launch to be good. Like, we don't want any launch like the original Rift launch, but the Go launch was pretty good, I think. So hopefully they'll just continue getting better with that stuff. But yeah, to me it just sounds like all good stuff. In terms of like the AR side of things, I think you're right that Facebook is investing more in the AR space maybe than VR, but based on the fact that they kind of build on each other. If you're developing for AR, you come up with some innovation, it'll probably work for VR. So it's kind of easier to research both at the same time and hope you gain some insight on both of them. So maybe their approach is like, try to develop far out AR ideas and then be like, oh, we could convert this into a VR product next year or something. And like, I think VR is a lot easier in that way. So it sounds to me like that's probably what they're doing with their research, just trying to focus on the future, long into the future and figure out little wins in the short term with that. But yeah, it sounds like Facebook is, still investing heavily in VR and AR, which is exciting. They didn't give up on us. They're still fighting. I still wish that Oculus Home was better and like, we had a metaverse type thing by now. I feel like with Facebook money, if you throw enough money at something, you'd think that could happen, but we're not there yet. That's maybe the one thing I'm a little upset about. Like I was expecting so much more when Facebook bought Oculus in terms of like the social side of it, but I hopefully we'll get there one of these years.
Steve, feel free to comment on anything that we've spoke about. One question I'll ask you very quickly first is, if you were like a company like Facebook, which is a social networking company, do you see that, if they hadn't invested anything in either VR or AR, to me, I would assume that a company like that would be far more leaning towards an AR future for their company rather than VR. But what do you think of that? And is there anything else you want to comment on specifically with this news story?
Well, I agree with you. I think it seems Facebook would be tilted towards AR. It seems to be the more social thing. And we continue to kind of pit, I don't want to say pit AR versus VR. They're different, but I think there's going to be so much technological overlap. Like, it would be like arguing, Blu-ray versus HD DVD. Like it's getting into the weeds, but like, I don't know. I think there's going to be tons of overlap. So I see that they went down the VR road as a way to kind of get the ball rolling. But I do think AR-esque elements are what's their end goal. And a company like Facebook has to constantly innovate. Didn't they buy Instagram? And, kids, like, it's already the kids that are like 10, 11, 12, 14, like Facebook's not cool. That's something old people use. And I can remember a time when Facebook was new. I was in college. This was back in, 07, 08. No, before then. It's back, anyways, I remember Facebook, and it was considered the new fresh thing, and MySpace was for old people, right? So I think Facebook has to find ways to still be cool, find ways to still be hip, or find a way to be so deeply rooted to us old people that we continue to use it. So this is all where that's going. They're just trying to find ways to innovate and to stay relevant, so that some company that they're not able to buy, like an Instagram or a Snapchat, if they're not able to acquire on them, some company may swoop in and start eating their lunch. So that's really at a high level what I see happening here. At the more micro level, like they're developing teams, they're moving people around. I don't think there's tons to say. I think kind of reorganizing different elements of your company are pretty commonplace. And I think they have a lot of money, and I think they influence the market. So I'm glad that there is a big hitter. Like, a lot of people don't like Facebook. I'm sort of neutral on them. I don't hate them, but I don't love them. And I'm just happy, though. The one thing that I do like about them is that they carry a big stick. They have a very large bank account, and I like having someone with a large bank account being involved in this industry to keep pushing it and keep moving it forward, because and I feel similarly about Sony. They have a pretty big voice in the market, but most of the companies, I think of like a Pimax or even an HTC, they don't carry a big stick, and it's hard to truly influence a market. So we may not agree with what Facebook is doing. We may always be skeptical of some of their ethics, so to speak, but I think that's probably better than there not being a company like Facebook with such deep pocketbooks being involved. So that's really how I look at this element here. Is not much to say specifically to AR, I don't think, other than just them signaling continued investment and continued involvement.
Yeah, Anthony, I know this is a little bit of an AR heavy show, but
so that means he loves it.
Have you got any sort of specific thoughts on this? But also, I don't know if you want to mention, because we're getting a lot of comments in chat about Apple as well, and we know this is sort of the beast that's rumbling beneath the surface in terms of AR, because they are going to do something eventually. We just don't know what yet. What are your thoughts?
Well, first on the Facebook thing is like one of the main issues with this news story here. So was it Business Insider that originally had this information? And they have like Business Insider apparently has somebody that has seen this prototype of this AR thing that Facebook has. And supposedly it's very lightweight, like much lighter weight than like a Magic Leap. Like I think they estimated it's like 70 grams or something. And I think Magic Leap is like 400 grams or something, ballpark, right? And the person that tried it said that it was lightweight, but it didn't feel like something where if you accidentally sat on it, you would just crush it instantly. So it's kind of like in between this range there. The other thing that we heard from Business Insider is supposedly, and this is all speculatory right now, we don't know that this is actually legitimate, but supposedly 100 or hundreds of employees have left Facebook Reality Labs and been moved to a new unit, this AR unit, and that Michael Abrash and the Bosworth guy, I forget his first name, that they've been named the head of this new AR unit, but that Michael Abrash is still head of the VR part as well. So he's pulling double duty. He's head of the AR and the VR, which is perfectly fine. Like you said, all these technologies are sharing a lot of the same things. But the thing that jumps out to me is hundreds of employees. Like if this was like 10, 15, 20 employees, that would be one thing, but hundreds of employees. A lot of people were kind of thinking that this might signal that something is imminent, like an announcement is about to come. And like they're shuffling the decks, they're arranging things because an announcement is imminent and they're getting ready. And like all of these titles, it's now AR/VR. All of the titles now at Facebook are like AR/VR. So it used to not be that. Now they're putting AR and it's, alphabetical. But basically what we're saying here is if you're Mark Zuckerberg and you've seen AR prototypes behind closed doors that are maybe 7 years into the future, they have to be miniaturized. It's not ready for prime time. And that AR is going to be a major deal, just like he knows VR is going to be a major deal. That's why he bought Oculus, because he could see the future. But if you're at the head of these companies and that AR's got a good 5, 6, 7 years before it's going to ever matter at all, but you also know that this may be the next smartphone thing, like this is the next huge computing platform, you do not want to be on the outside looking in. And so let's just say you're Zuckerberg, right? AR is going to be absolutely huge in maybe 7 years, but you're sitting here and there's a company, Magic Leap, and they're introducing a product and everybody's getting all excited about it. And yeah, it's much ado about nothing, but it did generate a lot of hype there. Then you have at CES, you have companies like InReal and you've got like Avagant and, all these other little companies have their little things that they're showing off. Every time somebody shows off a new AR thing or announces some breakthrough AR thing, there's got to be a little part of you that feels a little tinge like, oh shit, this might be danger, like these are other competitors that are going to try to eat our lunch at some point. And so you start to get a little bit shaky because you really believe this is the future. So I believe you could take hundreds of employees and move them into a special facility and feel like you've got to step up your efforts because Apple, Google, everybody, Microsoft, you hear Microsoft is going to unveil HoloLens too. These are all major competitors that want to run the show. They want to be the leaders in this next computing platform. And your cards are not on the table. You're not even part of the program right now. Behind the scenes you are, but out front you're not there. You start to get a little bit concerned and a little bit worried, I think. And And it's still way too early. Like, it's way too early for VR, but at the same time, you don't want people to forget about you. So the thing is, like, people think there's going to be an announcement imminent from Facebook about some major AR product. Like, they're going to show off these glasses and it's going to be a big deal, like GDC or something like that. But I go back to the Oculus Quest, man. You don't want to confuse the message. The Oculus Quest is a real product that is coming this April. It's $400. They're going to be selling it at all kinds of stores. You don't want to screw that up. So I don't think they introduce anything AR until later this year, after Oculus Quest has already had a great launch and the wheels are turning and Oculus Quest is going good. But something is brewing behind the scenes if literally hundreds of employees have left a particular building and now they're in another building. Something is going on. There is a shift.
Well, I mean, Quest and some sort of AR glasses aren't necessarily competing devices. And, I think you mentioned Apple, or chat's mentioning Apple. Someone mentioned Apple. And if you look at Apple, like the iPhone is a big part of their business, but, it's now at this point where every year when they show off the newest iPhone, they may or may not show off the newest Apple Watch, or they may or may not show off the newest iPad. Like there's a point where you get a product lineup, and there isn't necessarily cannibalism. So there are consumers out there that'll want to buy a Quest and will want some sort of AR sunglasses or something to wear when they're driving down the road. So I don't think it Quest necessarily precludes them from releasing some sort of device this year. I'm not saying that they are. Like, I don't necessarily believe that they are, but I don't think that it says, hey, we gotta focus on Quest, otherwise we're gonna confuse people, and we can't release anything else. Like, I'm not sure I believe that's true.
Okay, well, my argument, like, Steve, for me, for all of us on this show, it wouldn't confuse any of us. But I'm talking about, like, your buddy, your average buddy that you go golfing with. He hears about an Oculus Quest, and then he hears about Facebook AR, blah blah blah, and he's like, wait a minute, is it VR or AR? The average Joe Schmo, which may not even be
ding ding ding,
somebody that's going to buy either of these things.
There you go. That's where I'm at.
Confusing them. I don't think you confuse people like that. I think the launch of the Quest is so incredibly important. You don't take any chances with that. I would bet dollars to donuts there will be no AR announcement before the Quest is launched.
I'm not saying I don't think there will be. I 100% don't think there will be. But I don't think it's because they have to avoid confusion with the Quest, because anybody buying a Quest in early on is going to be informed enough, right? They're not at a point where someone's buying this crap at Walmart. Like, anybody buying this stuff is within reason are going to do their research. And I'll stick with my Apple example. Like, anybody buying an iPhone understands what they're buying. They understand that it's not a watch. They understand that it's not a tablet. Like, at some point your consumer is intelligent enough, especially when it's a niche product, that they're not going to be confused by different technologies. Some people may be. I'm not saying zero, souls walking the earth will be confused, but I think the bulk of your consumer won't be confused. Again, it's a moot point. I don't think they're announcing a AR product, but at some point, again, like Apple, if they create an AR product line and a VR product line, they're going to have to get away from this idea of cannibalism. Like, that's not tenable long term. They will have to talk about multiple products at the same time, because they're going to want them to have some sort of overlap connectivity or something like that. And I can't see a world where they're so scared. It's not like Xbox and Sony. Like, they'll have multiple devices, multiple services, multiple platforms, so to speak, and they're going to have to be able to talk about them simultaneously. And we have to get away from the idea that the consumer is so stupid and scared that they can't, because the new consumer, the next generation of consumers, they're not grandma that grew up with a rotary phone. Like, they are people that grew up in the internet era, and they know how to type and they know how to do things. And also the millennial generation is very confident. Like, they don't know anything, but they'll act like they do. So,
no
sorry,
offense, Chris.
Sorry. So, like, I don't think we have to worry about confusing people. I think that'll sort of die off when the baby boomers, are no longer making tech decisions.
Yeah, but I think, Anthony is spot on with that. Facebook really needs is thinking like all these companies are making AR things. We don't have any products. We're just doing all this research. We don't have anything to show for it. We don't have revenue to show for it. Like Microsoft did a little bit of research, released something. They're making a bunch of money. They have the military contract. Like, what is Facebook doing? They're not making money off of this research yet. So I think, that's, you hit it on the head, nail on the head there. Like they need to start making money, maybe just, for themselves to not be buried.
Yeah, it's good point. Because they do need to start exploring this area anyway. I think it's worth mentioning that I assume everybody's sort of on board with me in terms of this AR technology not being anything close in the next couple of years in terms of what Apple will possibly be releasing or anything like that. I'm assuming Apple won't release anything for at least 3 to 4 years, something like that, because they want to get a form factor down to the point where people will want to buy these things.
Yeah, Apple's biggest like we're not going to see an Apple product anytime soon in this category because see, the problem with Apple, they are so hyper focused on image and appearance and it has to fit in. Like Apple is never going to release a big bulbous thing that you put on your head. They're just never going to do that. They simply will not do that. But if we look at something like the in real light, and we're starting to see things, it's smaller. It's a smaller thing. It doesn't look quite as obnoxious. So I think see, Apple, but then at the same time, Apple, when they come in, they want the technology to be incredibly compelling, which means a large field of view and all the accoutrements that come along with that. But at the same time, it's got to have a cosmetic look that works for them. And those things they're opposed right now. And I don't see that change. Like it's going to be a couple of years. So, I mean, don't even think about Apple right now.
Yeah. And I think any company, we're seeing all of these things from HoloLens, from Microsoft, and all of these other AR companies. I think they're doing great work in what they're doing, but none of these products are consumer-based products that will get to the point that we all want them to get to is mobile phone replacements. They're just not ready. The technology is just not ready yet. And whether, part of me wonders as well whether it's even physically possible. Is it even possible to get something down to the size of a normal pair of glasses that has all of this power and all of this stuff that it can do, a HoloLens kind of experience with a really wide field of view in the form factor of just a normal pair of glasses? I'm sure people are working night and day on trying to get it to realize whether that's possible or not. I don't know. But
John Schubrock in chat says it's unusual for Apple not being the leaders when you think of how big the impact they had with tablets and smartphones. And that's a very good point because Apple may not be the leader. Like they knocked it. Like they had a series of starting with the iPod into the iPhone and sort of kicking off the tablet. Like they had one success after another, but I think that doesn't guarantee them success in a totally different space. Like they could kind of in the AR VR space could fall back to pre-iPod Apple. Like there's no guarantees that they're gonna be the major hitters. I wouldn't assume that they wouldn't. Like it would be foolish to think you're going to win out against Apple necessarily. But I like John's point there that they may not necessarily be the Goliath that we think they will be.
Yeah, they certainly, as Crunchy says as well, Apple doesn't go first. They won't be the first. They weren't the first to smartphones. They just did it in a more compelling way, and people followed suit after that. So I see a very similar thing possibly happening with AR headsets, but we'll see what happens with that. Okay, well, let's get on to a few games that we've all been playing this week. We've got a few to talk about. The first one is a big release, Ace Combat 7. Now, I don't believe any of us, well, none of us picked this game up, but you can get the demo from the Japan PSN. So we sort of made a PSN,
where are you seeing?
Japan
How you
PSN
feeling in
account
there?
I feel like
to download
really
the demo and give it a
yeah.
try.
Like this is
so
actually,
Chris,
it's so
no,
detailed.
sorry,
It's
have
so
you tried
insane.
it, Chris?
I want to like lean out.
No, okay. Anthony, let me go over to you first on this one. So there's been a lot of people talking about it. Everybody seems to be raving about it. What's your opinion?
Yeah, so, people were really, really raving about this thing. Like they were raving about it in the same way that people were raving about Wipeout VR when everybody first got their hands on that, or Astrobot when everybody first got their hands on that. Maybe not to the degree of those two, but pretty darn close in terms of like the ranting and raving. Like, I forget who it was at Upload VR that did the review for Ace Combat 7, but he was basically talking about like grinning from ear to ear and that this was the most impressive VR like he kind of basically said it was the most impressive VR experience he's had to this point in time. And I read something like that, I'm like, wow. And then like I know Virtual Reality Oasis, like they did a video, like Mike did a video on it, and I believe he was raving about it. Paradise Decay has kind of raved about it a little bit. So all these different people have raved about it. So I'm thinking, oh my God, this must be like really amazing and spectacular. I got into the demo last night and I played it maybe like 4 different times because it goes by pretty quickly. Like you're in it, you die, or you crash in the ocean, or you blow up a couple jets and it's over with. I was in there 4 times and I don't know what everybody's raving about, man. I don't know. I mean, it's cool. It's pretty cool, but like there was nothing about it to me that like I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. No, it was like, okay, I don't know. I guess maybe go to somebody else, Gary.
Yeah, well, I'll just quickly, because there's not a lot to say on it, only because it's so short. The demo is really, really short. It's over before you've started, really. But I enjoyed it for what it is. And I think part of the attraction for this kind of stuff, I'm never going to be able to fly one of these jet planes in this way. And part of it comes from that. It gives me an experience or an approximation of an experience that I've got no chance of doing in real life. And I like that aspect of it. I enjoyed the game, the demo, for what it is. There's not a lot to really get your teeth into with this demo, though. And I don't know if that changes if you pick up the full game. We didn't pick up the full game because it's $60 and it's only got 3 VR missions. So it just seems a little bit ridiculous to do it. If you're not going to play the flat version, why would you pay that much money just for the VR missions? I'm glad people have done and to give their impressions on it. But I don't think I would do that. And I was actually really hyped for this game because although I'm not like a hardcore flight simulator, or even this is not a flight simulator, this is very arcadey, but I'm not really sort of into this kind of this kind of game, really, flight simulator, flight or arcadey kind of game necessarily. But it just really appealed to me for the reasons I said. I could never fly one of these planes, and I'd like to experience some approximation of doing so. So that's really why I liked it. But even then, I'm not going to pay that amount of money for it. The demo was good, but just not enough to get my teeth into. Steve, what do you think?
I thought it was very good. I want to play more, but I'm not at a point where I want to put $60 to do it. I think the price to game time factor is just too absurd. From what I understand, that you're going to get about 45 minutes of playtime from this VR exclusive. And the problem is that this is packaged with a mainline game, and Sony's at a point where they are, their bread and butter is still monitor or, flat screen gaming. And as much as they're doing for VR, and I appreciate them for it, they're not going to go counter to their bread and butter just yet. So, and when it comes to a game like this, like, I don't know if they were pushing Bandai Namco to make the whole game in VR or what, but I would really love to see them frack out the VR aspect and say, okay, here's the VR missions as a standalone for $20 or something, because I think it would sell through the roof. Like, I think the quality is really, really, really damn good. I had a great time with it. Now, I did use my HOTAS Thrustmaster that I have. You can kind of see it in the chair in the background. I have it mounted nice to an office chair, and it's a great time. Like, I want to play more of this, and I think the arcadey aspect that you mentioned, Gary, really suits me because I'm impressed with the technology. I'm impressed with the sensation of flying, but like some of the flight simulators that I've never played, so I have to be careful in what I say about them as a whole, but I almost think in a little way of Elite Dangerous. There's so much complexity to them, and you have to turn levers. You know, it's trying to be realistic, like you're really flying a fighter jet. I don't necessarily want that. I don't want the learning curve. I just want to get out there and fly and have fun. And Ace Combat does that. Like, you just get out there and fly. You don't have to flip a bunch of toggles and be too overly realistic with with everything you do. So this is really up my alley, very much like why I like Drive Club a lot, because it's arcadey enough. It's realistic. It's not like playing Need for Speed or something, but it's arcadey enough that the learning curve isn't just really, really steep. So I hope I recommend it as for the content that it is, but I don't necessarily recommend people buy it due to the limited time that you get. Like, the VR content is very small. So if you think you're going to play this game flat and you're really into flying stuff, then yeah, pay the $60. Like, you'll enjoy this title, I think. But if you're buying it just for the VR content, man, it's a pretty steep asking price. And I'm pretty liberal. Like within our group, like, I'm the one that usually will buy something or advocate buying something, for the value or for the content. So, if it's a no buy on the value proposition for me, that means it's really, I think, really sort of an outlier and outside of what should be happening, which is unfortunate, but great game otherwise.
Yeah. Do you wonder why they have only included 3 VR missions? To me, when I'm playing this, the demo, there doesn't seem to be anything like overt in the sense that they'd need to take a lot of time out to develop specifically the VR, where they could only do 3 VR missions and not convert all of the other missions as well. Is there anything you're seeing, and can you see any like reason why they would have limited it to 3 missions?
I haven't the slightest clue. Like, of course, I haven't played any of the flat content, nor will I. But from what I saw from the demo and from what I've seen of people that bought the full game, I don't see a limitation there. But I don't know. Maybe it's a performance thing. Maybe the base game is doing more. Maybe there's more jets. Maybe there's more stuff happening and they couldn't get the performance right. Or maybe they just simply didn't dedicate the resources. This is what they set out to do. Because I believe the game was delayed at some point, or we thought it was coming sooner.
Yeah.
I went back actually when we were doing our 2019 preview. I caught a glimpse of our 2018 preview, and we had Ace Combat 7 as a 2018 game that we were looking forward to. So maybe they just ran out of time. Either way, like, I agree with you. I don't see anything that says they couldn't have the whole game in VR. But then again, I haven't really played it, flat enough to see, or at all to see if there is a technical reason why they couldn't have the whole game in VR. I'd like to know that answer. Maybe somebody in chat is a Ace Combat fan and has played it flat, but just my hunch is that's not the case, though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next game, which is another flying game, Flying Aces Navy Pilot Simulator. I think we've all tried this one. Chris, I'll go over to you first on this. What did you think of this game?
Yeah, so it's what it's called. It's a Navy pilot simulator, and it's cool because I haven't played too many flight sims in VR. I feel like this might be, this is pretty realistic in terms of the cockpit of the Navy pilot thing. What do you call it?
It's actually just on that point, Chris.
Yeah.
It's actually the same plane as in Ace Combat 7, and you can actually see, the similarities between the two cockpits. Really, they're very close. Even the position of certain switches and stuff like that.
That's funny. So I think this is like a good start. I'll label this game as it's a good start. I don't think it's ready to be released, just because like you get in the game and there's like, it's just not polished. It doesn't feel good. Like all the controls for me were finicky with the touch controllers. we were talking about it before the show, and like the way you hold the stick isn't as natural as it would be on like, if you play like any other flight games. So for me, like, I don't know, man. It's okay. It's all right. I mean, if you always have wanted to fly, this, or be a pilot like this is a cool way to try that out. But just based on my first impressions, I didn't play it too long because it wasn't very good, I don't think. Does someone else want to talk about it?
Yeah, just very quickly, because it's very difficult, we don't want to talk, we don't want to be particularly too harsh on any game on this show. If we're going to be honest, but it's not easy to sit here and just criticize a game and sort of discourage the developer from doing it. And that's the way I felt the first time I went into this game. Now, I played it again a couple of days ago. So the first time I went into this game, there was no stereoscopic view or anything like that of the hangar where you start off, so it was just flat. There was no 3D effect at all, and it's a bad first impression to get. Also, I think Anthony will probably touch on this as well. In the hangar, the guy that you're talking to, it's not a great first impression overall, but I'll let him speak a bit more about that. But then I went in again a couple of days yesterday, and I got to grips far more. I played through the remaining training missions that I didn't do the first time, and then I went into the first mission. I think actually there's a fair amount of potential with this game. My first impression wasn't great, but once I went in and progressed a little bit more, and I got to grips with the motion controllers. So this game uses motion controllers. I don't know if there's an option to use a HOTAS, which I would love, because I think with this, with the flight stick and throttle, having any kind of tactile feedback is a benefit with this kind of game. I get what they're trying to do in terms of using motion controllers, flicking switches, starting the takeoff procedure in a more natural way. All of that works great. What doesn't work great is when you're up in the air and you're trying to control this thing with motion controllers and you've got no tactile response. It took a while for me to get actually used to that part of it because, and I'll try to describe this for the audio listeners as well, that the flight stick is in front of you, and instead of doing like an arc kind of movement as you would naturally do if you saw this in virtual reality, that doesn't work too well.
Sort of like Vox Machina.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the same way as you want it to work. So what I found was if you hold the motion controller in front of you and just use the 3 degrees of freedom I am using the controllers and just literally rotate, it's literal rotational movement, you get a much better version of how this game is supposed to be played. And from that point on, I could do the missions relatively easy without the hindrance of all these control issues I had originally. So the game, I agree with Chris. Okay, I think this has been released too early. I think it needs more work, but I do see some potential. So I'm not going to be too harsh on it. I think it just needs a little bit more work, and the developers are working on it. So I look forward to see what they are going to do.
It's a good first start, right?
Yeah. Steve, so I'll go over to you next on this one.
So I guess the developer was trying to time this with Ace Combat. Like I don't know. Like I don't know if that was a good decision because Ace Combat just feels far more fluid and far more, I don't know, enjoyable. I think this is coming out of the oven too early. I don't know what's its status. I'm assuming it's early access at some point, or maybe it's not even released to the public yet. But I agree with both of you in that it's not ready in either case. So the game, it just, there's a lot done right. The ship looks fine. Flying feels okay. It doesn't, I can't put my finger on exactly. It doesn't feel quite as good as Ace Combat, and I don't think it's exclusively the control. I did play this on my Pimax and with a Vive controller, and it took me a minute, like you, Gary, to realize how the flight stick operated, and it wasn't until I kind of left my Vive controller pointing up, like I was holding a flight stick and was using the IMU to steer the craft before I got the hang of it. But I don't know, there's something missing, and usually I feel what is missing from a game or from a piece of content. Like X is broken or Y isn't correct, but this game, like I can't say what exactly is wrong, but something is wrong. And I hate not being able to give direct feedback that says, this is why I don't like this game, but just something coming together. I don't know. It's like hearing a orchestra of talented musicians, but for some reason they're a quarter beat off or something. Like just something isn't kosher. And, other than that, like I think it has promise. It didn't take too long. I mentioned before with Ace Combat 7 that it was arcadey enough. It didn't take long to get into the air. This game takes it a step further. You have to flip some switches and you have to turn the engine on, the batteries on, and so forth. So it is a step more towards sim. But within, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes, I was in the air. So it wasn't that hard in a true sim way where you're stuck on the runway for a long period of time. So, maybe this is something to keep. I do not recommend buying it anytime soon, but maybe keep your eye on it. It could get there. I think the developer may figure it out, and they've gone a long way. Like visually, like they've designed a lot, so it isn't an overly simple cockpit like Windlands or something. Like they've clearly got some research and some investigation into how this craft is supposed to operate. Like I don't know if the developer is a former pilot or what, but there's some knowledge there. Like, and there's definitely some work being done, but they just got to figure out what is keeping it from being all the way there and making it feel just right.
Yeah, just quickly before I pass it over to Anthony, I did want to say, because the developer is still sort of making improvements on this. It is an early access game, but they are doing sort of continual improvements. And I wanted to mention that the fact that I mentioned earlier with regards to the 3D effects in the hangar, that was rectified like the following day when I first tried it. They rectified it, and now it is full 3D in there as well. So I think they are sort of relatively passionate about this and going to continue to develop it. But Anthony, what did you think of this one?
Well, first of all, one of the things I'll say about like flight simulators in general, like I don't know that I'm ever, and when I'm talking about flight simulators, I'm talking about realistic modern day flight, like not like a spaceship or something. But what I'm saying is, I don't know that I'm ever going to really be interested in this genre until I get into a simulator and I'm in the cockpit and I'm looking at all the levers and they are freaking crystal clear and I can read them as clear as day. And it's like I'm in reality. I'm in a cockpit. I'm looking at the indicators and they're crystal, sharp as can be, no fuzziness. And we're not there yet. Not with Ace Combat 7, not with this game. Then the other thing too is, okay, so that's the cockpit part of it. The other thing too is, if I'm flying like over oceans and I'm flying over little islands and stuff, the actual detail is going to have to be at such a high level where I'm looking out the window and I'm like, oh my God, that really looks like an ocean right there. And again, Ace Combat 7 and this game, I don't think so. It doesn't look like, it just doesn't look that good because this is not my genre. This is not my thing. So for me, it's kind of like, the reason I got into brass tactics, that wasn't my genre either, but they did so many incredible things with it that it forced me to look at something that isn't my normal genre. So for like flight sims, like it's going to take the cockpit being photoreal and the outside environments being photoreal before I care about it. Now, if I'm in a spaceship and we're fighting aliens and there's planets and I'm in outer space, that's a different thing because I'm entertained by all of this. But I'm not entertained by just like seeing clouds and ocean. Like that doesn't do anything for me. And then also like you're seeing jets way the hell out there. They're little specks on the screen. And I feel like every time I'm in any kind of a dogfighting game, it's like you're flying in a plane like this. There's jets. You're shooting at them. You miss them. Okay, now you bank. And now you're trying to do it again. And now you bank and you're trying. Like to me, that's what it is. It's rinse and repeat little specks on clouds. And it's like, is this really entertaining? But some people it is. Now, this Flying Aces Navy Pilot Simulator specifically, like the production value is pretty poor, I'll say. Because at the very beginning, they have this guy that comes out and he's like, it's almost like they animated an individual arm and then they animated this individual arm and they animated an individual leg. but it was all taped on a body and it's like he kind of wobbles out here and he's got like different pieces of his arms and stuff moving. And then the voiceover, and I told this to the developer. I said, look, like, I don't know if they got like the janitor or their cousin Bobby or somebody to come in and do the voice work, but if you're going to have a game that has actual voiceover work, you got to get somebody that has a compelling voice, that has some oomph in his voice, or sounds like this guy just, the person that they got to do it. And then also like maybe go to an airport hangar, have like engine noises and stuff, bring all your recording equipment there, record somebody talking in an airport hangar where it has that echo. You got engine noises in the background. Like, give me a real experience. Also, at the very beginning, they're talking about a terrorist thing, and they're talking about Mahmoud, is like, are we ever going to start to get terrorists that aren't named Mahmoud? I mean, it's kind of like, really? I mean, let's get some other bad guy out there. The same thing is going on in movies and TV stories. It's like, it always has to be a terrorist from the Middle East. Okay, let's do this again. That's kind of a sidebar thing there. Yeah.
No, yeah. I think honestly, I think we've been pretty fair to this game overall, because there are problems with it, but it's I see potential if you like this kind of game. And I take Anthony's point actually, what you were talking about, because I played flight simulators and just flying games back on 8-bit computers and consoles. I mean, they were really bad, which were especially to the point you were talking about, where you're just seeing a dot in the distance, then it's gone, and that's literally the game. And I understand it, but with this now, where you feel like you're a bit more in the cockpit and having an experience that you can never have in real life, I think that has a certain attraction for some people. It's not for everybody, of course. Like,
did you ever enable super sampling though, Anthony? Like, super sampling goes a long way for like trying to make out a ship in the distance and stuff like that. You're on a 1080 Ti, you should be super sampling good at this point.
Yeah, well, I'm doing a lot of these Let's Plays now too, though. So I'm kind of conflicted that if I have the super sampling and I'm also recording a video at the same time, is my video going to be stuttery? I don't know. So I've kind of like, I was doing the Oculus Tray tool and I was doing super sampling. I've done it, but then I've also recorded some Let's Plays where the video was a little bit jittery, and then I'm thinking, I should probably not do this super sampling when I'm doing Let's Plays. So I don't know. It shouldn't
affect your Let's Plays unless you're using the NVIDIA encoder to encode your videos.
I am using the
NVIDIA. Then it can, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to change the order very quickly here. So I wanted to get onto Dead Groundz. I've played this game. I don't know. Has anybody else played Dead Groundz?
I played the tutorial.
Okay, well, we can talk about this quickly. I don't want to spend too long on it. I emailed them. They sent over a key for our account, and this is a beta. This has not been released yet, this game. So basically what it is, the direct comparison, the easiest comparison is to say that this is very much like an Arizona Sunshine kind of game. It's sort of zombie-based, zombie shooter. But the thing that attracted me to this, and the reason why I wanted to get onto this, is the fact that it's got a narrative. There's so many games that come out in VR and in, flat games as well, which are just sort of multiplayer and very thin in terms of narrative. So whenever a game comes out where it's got a single player mode and it's got some kind of story behind it, I always like to jump into these. And the comparison with Arizona Sunshine on this particular game is quite apt. It's very similar. So you play a character where you go to you play through a tutorial first, and you are just learning all of the controls in a kind of like a futuristic way. So it's set out in a way where you start off in the cabin of a boat, and then you go through, you fall asleep, and then you play through the tutorials as if these are all dreams, which actually is quite an interesting way of doing a tutorial, I thought. But then you find yourself on this island. So it's very similar to Arizona Sunshine from that point on. It's narrative based. You're trying to find things to pick up, to unlock doors, to progress to the next point. I thought actually this was really well done. Now, it's important to say that this game has not been released. It's in a very beta stage, and that sort of leads on to the points I want to say very quickly about some small criticisms. So the voice acting is possibly the worst voice acting I've ever heard in any game ever. It's really bad. And the thing is, you can sort of ignore that. You can get past it. It's your character voice. It doesn't work particularly well. It's not. It just doesn't. It's not realistic in any way. And it sort of took me out of it a little bit. But also because this game is a beta version, it's not released yet. They still have parts where there is no voice acting. So you go through certain parts and you just get some kind of subtitles, which is fine. You know, I'm sure they'll add them in there and that's all okay. It doesn't really detract from the overall experience at the moment. But I do want to just say, you know, I'm pretty positive on this. I think this is one to look out for. If you are a fan of Arizona Sunshine, this is a no-brainer. This is one definitely to look out for. And they do some interesting things. The graphics are really good. And I think, you know, in terms of just environments, just progressing through these different environments, it keeps itself interesting. At least the amount I've played, you're in sort of very bright outside areas. It's a nice, again, like Arizona Sunshine. I like being in these areas which are sunny and bright, and it just works so well. And yet you also have these other contrasted environments where you go into caves. Yeah, I really enjoyed it for what it is. I'll look out for it a bit more. Don't want to say too much more than that at the moment. Anthony, what did you think the amount you played?
Yeah, so I mean, all I did was just the very beginning tutorial where you're like on that boat and you're kind of like, I think I did go to sleep and I don't remember what happened after that. But the only thing I remember with it is it flowed very well. Like the free locomotion, it was very smooth. I was moving around. I was opening drawers and closing drawers and picking things up, and it was bright. Like I felt like the engine was bright, and I thought the graphics were pretty good, but it felt good to me, but I didn't get into the actual meat of the game, so I can't really say too much.
Yeah, and yeah, Paradise Decay mentioned in chat. So in Mission 2, where you use the Live app, it's this thing that's in the game. They had a bug. The developers did have a bug on this where it sort of reduced performance down quite a lot. But they are removing that. Again, this is a beta. This has not been released, so there's a long way for it to go yet. But I think it's definitely one to keep your eye on. It impressed me more than I expected it to, honestly. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Okay. Okay, well, let's get on to Tabletop Gods now. This is another game that we received a key for. This is by Ghostfish Games, and it's $19.99 early access. Steve, let me go over to you first on this one. What did you think?
Well, I only got a couple matches in with it, and I was... you know, I shouldn't say this, I guess, but sometimes I don't, you know, I'm the type of person that I don't always read a manual, or, you know, I'm like, hey, I'm a smart guy. I can figure this out without reading a manual. So I did that with Tabletop Gods. I just went to single player, and I was like, let's go. So I didn't do the tutorial, and I'm like, well, I'll get back to it. Like, you know, tomorrow morning, this was yesterday. I'm like, tomorrow morning, I'll wake up, I'll do the tutorial. I'll spend like an hour with it. And then something happened with the kids, and that didn't happen. So I can't speak too closely, but I will say that the couple matches that I played sort of blindly, it really impressed me. Like I thought, like I don't know, I guess I didn't hear too much about this game, or I just wasn't tracking it very closely. But so my expectations were, oh, this is a game I haven't heard of. And I think the three of you know what I'm talking about. When it's a game you really haven't heard much about, your expectations are low. Whereas if it's a game you've heard a lot of buzz about, your expectations are higher. So this being a game I hadn't heard a lot about, my expectations were sort of middling, and it exceeded those middling expectations. I think this is a good, fun, arcadey, strategy type game. Like, if you start with Brass Tactics, which is already a stripped down sort of strategy game from the real, like, RTS enthusiasts, like Brass Tactics is simple. Tabletop Gods might be, sort of similarly paced, equally similar. It's more complex in some ways, but simpler in other ways. And I think that accessibility is good. It's got a good cartoony, arcadey sort of theme. I really I guess I'll say I'm going to spend a lot more time with this one. I think there's enough there, and it's also from what I understand, a cross-platform game in that you can play it with people on a monitor, and so what that'll mean is maybe the community will be larger than your typical VR only game. So I'll reserve complete judgment to a future point where I can give it the time it needs, but I will say that my first initial impression is that I was very pleased with it, exceeded expectations, and I want to play it more. So if we contrast that to another game we talked about today, there's games that I don't want to play more. My time is precious. Tabletop Gods is a game I want to play more of. So for me, that's a very positive stance. If I want to dedicate my limited time to playing this further, that's really as good as I can say about any game. Like that's high praise from me.
Chris, I think you've played this too. What did you think?
Yeah, and like Steve, I didn't get to too much time with this, but it's a game that I really want to play more because it reminds me of that Brass Tactics feeling of like those little tiny guys and like that cool cartoony art style that really pops out in current gen VR headsets. I just did a few like practice rounds with single player. I don't want to screw up in multiplayer yet. I'm not ready to lose to some people who have like mastered this game. But it's kind of has like the two phases. So you set up your defenses anywhere you want. You have like these chunks similar to Brass Tactics where like you own this amount of land or whatever. Like this is your zone. So after you do that, you can place all these real-time units in there wherever you want in your side. And then you battle and try to defeat the other castle on the other side, which was really fun. Like it seems like a really simple concept, but it was executed really well, which I think is what all like indie games really should be doing, is something similar to Tabletop Gods, where you have like a very simple mechanic, very simple system that's really fun, and then just keep iterating on it, making it look nicer and more polished. This game felt really polished. Everything about it felt really polished, and it's something I want to go back and play more of. It has that same feeling of Brass Tactics where you're in this little space, but the movement's different and kind of cool. Like you're around this circular map and you just use the thumbstick to kind of swivel around it, which was cool. I guess it's not as fun for me as flicking the table around because that's always going to be like the most fun thing to do, but I like that it's this tiny enclosed battle that you can get really close, and I do want to spend a lot more time with this. I haven't gotten too much into the mechanics. It looks like you could even cast spells and stuff. I didn't look at the tutorial. I don't know how to do that, but I guess you can cast spells, which is cool. So there's some more depth, I guess.
Did you drop a fireball? Like, or did you see your opponent drop a fireball? Like,
I think so.
That's a really cool. It's this big fireball that comes straight down and it makes this big fire thing. And because like I'm always impressed by tabletop type stuff in 3D and in VR, like scale. Like I'm always impressed by varying scale. And when the fireball comes down and it has an area radius attack, and just the way the fireball hits and the smoke and the flames, I think we're seeing it on screen at the moment. It looks really neat because you're seeing it within scale in this little world. It's almost like if you can imagine the Google Earth app having a fireball hit the city or something. It kind of, or a meteorite. It's just a cool little effect. I think it looked great in VR.
Oh yeah, and it's just, I guess this is the first game released by this studio. I think it's really good, and like 100% of the 20 or so reviews for the game on Steam are like positive. So like I think this game has a lot of potential. More people got to get into this. This is like a hidden gem, maybe. Well, we'll talk more about it in the coming weeks. I bet I need to get more time.
Yeah, it's technically in early access, and it's $19.99. When I looked at it on Steam earlier in the week. And again, I haven't put a ton into it, but I can trust my gut. I've played a ton of games, and I could say with limited time, like I think it's worth the $20. I think you'll get far more use out of a game like this than Ace Combat 7 for $60.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is when this is early access. This is when a game should be in early access. Like it's good enough that you want to play it without there having to be a crap ton of updates. So like, awesome job to Ghostfish Games.
Yeah. The I suppose the obvious comparison is Brass Tactics, but there are some differences that Chris touched on. So you have this area before the match starts where you sort of place a few things before the match starts, and there's 3 distinct rounds as well in this game rather than just sort of continuous flow in Brass Tactics. But It works really well. I loved it. Again, limited amount of time that I've spent with this, but I think yeah. Again, I'm gonna play a lot more of this because I played a lot of Brass Tactics, and this has that same feeling, but with some slight differences, which I appreciate as well. So yeah, I highly recommend this. Anthony, what did you think?
Yeah, so when we ended up getting a code for this and I saw it and I was like tabletop gods and I was like, oh man, another RTS. I'm not really into RTSs. And so I didn't really have hype for this at all. But I was like, they're all going to be talking about it. I'm going to need to go in there and play it myself. So I went ahead and went in and I mean, we're all saying the same thing. Like there's production value here. There's like really good voiceover work. Like every time you put something down, you almost have like a Mortal Kombat style announcer that like talks about mage, whatever your necromancer,
That's perfect. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they kind of pop out and you do that. It's really intuitive. It works well. You know what we notice with this is the RTS genre and VR, it's like butter and toast, man. This just goes together perfectly. And so I think we're going to see a lot of RTS games coming to VR because it's just works so easy. It's like wave shooters and horror games. It's just made perfectly for it. Now, if you put a gun to my head and said, would you rather play this or Brass Tactics? I would go with Brass Tactics. But if somebody picked up Brass Tactics and they pretty much have, squeezed every little bit of juice out of Brass Tactics, they're looking for something different, this would be an awesome opportunity as well. And then I think I don't know what Brass Tactics is selling for right now, but this is $20. It's solid. All I did was the practice mode, like what you guys did, and I was doing single player. But you see a guy's head on the other side of you, like a mask or something, almost like the ping pong game, 11 table tennis, where you see like the person's head over there. And so like if you're doing multiplayer, I'm sure you have like one guy on the other side of you, you're talking back and forth. That would probably be super fun. I didn't actually get into that part. But yeah, it's absolutely solid. This might be the best game of January because, January is a bit of a lighter month. We do have a Fisherman's Tale next week. And, people will say that Ace Combat 7 is the best game of January. But for me, so far right now, I'd say Tabletop Gods is my favorite game that has been released this month so far.
Yeah, definitely. Again, like Steve said, actually, it was a bit of a surprise. You see, we get these game keys, and sometimes you just think, I've got to go in and try this. But it's a pleasure when you get something like this, which is so well polished. And also, I think part of me feels like Brass Tactics paved the way for me to enjoy games like this as well, because this is not my kind of game, and yet I find myself wanting to play this more than a lot of games that we get sent. So I think there's a lot to like about it. Just quickly, I'll pass it over to somebody, whoever wants to answer this. Did you feel like the depth within this is more or less than Brass Tactics? I know we've only played a limited amount, but what did you think, Steve?
I think possibly more. Like in some ways it's simpler, but in other ways it seems like it's faster hitting. Like because the tables are relatively smaller. You have less of a reaction time before the enemy is attacking one of your towers or whatever. So, like, I think, and it goes to that, and I don't think the developer's hiding behind it either. It's taking a step towards arcadey. The matches are much quicker, I think, from what I've seen. Like, some of my Brass Tactics matches, like, would borderline 45 minutes to an hour. I don't see myself having 1 hour matches in Tabletop Gods. And that's not a bad thing. Like sometimes, like, you got 20 minutes, you want to get a match done. I imagine there were people out there, myself included, that said, oh, I'd like to play Brass Tactics, but I don't have an hour. So I think I wouldn't even necessarily go as far as to say that Brass Tactics was necessarily better. I think they're different, and I think Brass Tactics definitely does some things better, and I think Brass Tactics had the advantage of being first. So to your point, Gary, it paved the way. But I think there's room. This is a different slice of cake. Like, they're similar. They're both cake, but this is a slightly different slice of cake meant to suit a slightly different taste. And I think that's okay.
Did anybody have any minor performance? Like, I had a little bit of hitchiness every now and then. Did anybody have that?
Not that I noticed. No, not that I noticed. Oh, although, because you put a video on your channel, didn't you, Anthony? It might have been. Yeah. Is that the time you played it? Was that when you noticed the problems, or?
Yeah, and so I was recording a video. So who knows?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, well, let's get on to the last thing we want to discuss this week. And I think anybody that's on any of the VR subreddits, they saw this from a few weeks ago, the PT, the Unreal PT, which was developed like a VR version from Radius Gordello. They made it a VR version of the playable teaser game that came out on PS4. It was a demo that came out on PS4 a long time ago now, but it's a horror game. I played through it in the flat version, and I also played an early version of the VR playable teaser as well, but not too much beyond that. Steve, I know you've played this. What did you tell us about it?
So, I was busy, and as everyone knows, I did the whole Pimax thing last week, so I really wasn't playing new stuff. I was spending time playing things that I was familiar with, and I had seen the community talking about Unreal PT, and I didn't jump on it. I'm like, okay, I'll get to it when I get on the other side of my initial Pimax impressions, and so I went to look for it this week, and apparently I went to the developers itch.io page about an hour after he had taken it down. I'm guessing it seems like Konami maybe gave him some flack. So for anyone that doesn't know, PT was a Silent Hill teaser from Konami and Kojima, I don't know, 6 years ago. And then there was the fallout between Kojima and Konami, so the game never really happened. And then I guess for some sort of business licensing contractual agreements, Sony had to pull the PT demo from the PlayStation Store, so you can no longer get this on your PlayStation. And so it's like this really treasured bit of pop culture almost within relatively recent gaming. And and I played through it back then when it was initially released on PlayStation. So this user and this person, I forgot his name, Radius Gordello. I don't know if that's his actual name or if it's just sort of his online moniker. But they recreated painstakingly. They recreated the whole PlayStation PT demo experience using the Unreal Engine, and made it for PC. And released it relatively recently. And I think it's a very, 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 very good and accurate recreation. So I did find the link. Paradise DK said he has a link if I need it. Maybe I'll post the link here on the show notes, because I do have it and I've since found it. And I played through the whole thing last night, and I think it's a good thing. It's free, right? Like, so now you have to go through the work. I recommend everyone try it, like, because it doesn't cost them anything. They have to go through the work of finding it. I'll post it, a Mediafire link, and it'll last as long as it lasts. I didn't host it directly myself, but I think it's worth doing. PT, it's a neat experience. It's moody. It's, in a way, it feels in VR. It feels a little bit like Transference, which is a good thing. It's different. So I'm not saying it's just like Transference, but it has a sort of psychological feel. Like you're not shooting zombies. You're not dealing with something in your face. It's more of the, and we talk about this when we talk about horror games. It's a fear of the unknown, a fear of what you thinking you're going to see, and such. So, and it's a nice creepy vibe and a simple little story if you follow it that is just psychotic and creepy. And I enjoyed that kind of thing. So in VR, it's not perfect. Radius Gordello admittedly doesn't have a VR headset, so he is not able to, or she, are not able to test a VR implementation. And initially, they've made some improvements based on user feedback. I played it last night on my Pimax. It chugged a little. It wasn't perfect, but it was playable. And if it's playable on a Pimax, I think it'll probably be more playable on a Vive, Rift, and so forth. So you don't have you have motion controllers and they work. I use the Vive controllers and I'm able to walk around analog. At some point you get a flashlight and the flashlight works with motion controllers just like you expect. But there's not a lot of interactivity. It's not too polished in that sense. But again, it's a free thing. And I think it's definitely worth checking out. Manfane in chat correctly points out that 1.0.7 is the current version. So if you find a download link, and again, I'll try to remember to post it here in our show notes on this episode. But if you find it elsewhere, or if you look for it, or if I forget to post, which is highly likely, you want to look for version 1.0.7.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, like, if you did download an older version of it, I mean, I felt like it was almost unplayable on the older version, only because of the weird distortion. It had like this fisheye lens kind of thing that didn't work well. I downloaded an older version. I've yet to try the newer version, but I look forward to trying that, actually, because that original PT that I played through on PS4 a long time ago, it was, I mean, it's terrifying. So I'd like to experience a little bit of that in VR as well. But yeah, again, on one of your points, Steve, when you said there's not a lot of interactivity in it, there's not really a lot in the game anyway. So I think they have sort of stayed close to the original game and just converted it over to VR. You're literally walking around the same corridor again and again and doing various things to make it trigger the next stage of progression. But yeah, I think I will go back in and try the updated version, because I loved, or I don't know if loved is the right word, but there's a lot to like about PT anyway.
Does it have like the like the radio commercials and everything, like the radio announcements and all that?
And I don't remember. I still I have two PlayStations here in my house, and I still have my original one that I bought when it released, and it has PT on it, but it's been so long since I played it that I don't know if it's the exact same like audio files, and maybe that's why Konami, made him take it down. Was there is the radio plays, and there's another thing that has voice acting. I'll try not to spoil anything, but that voice acting is there. I don't know if it is if this person recreated it or if he was somehow able to rip the audio from the PlayStation version, but it feels authentic. I don't feel like that there was that it had a cheesy, recorded in the bedroom with a sock over the microphone type of amateurism to it. It felt legit. It felt accurate to the experience.
The PT from way back in the days helped me get another $75 for when I sold my PlayStation 3, because I still had it on there, and I sold it to like some YouTube dude, and he was like, "Oh, you've got PT on it? Like, I'll give you an extra $100 if it has PT
Seriously?
on it." This was when it was at the height of its fame, like everybody, because they took it off. You couldn't get it anywhere.
Yeah, you still
had to find somebody that had, like, I don't even think there's a way to hack it onto it. Like, you had to have somebody that actually downloaded it.
So it when I got my PlayStation Pro, I did the hard drive migration utility that's in the Sony PlayStation, and I believe it migrated since I had it in my digital library, and I'm about 98% sure it migrated, but at the very least, I still have it on my OG PS4. I'm thinking I might need to sell it now.
I
get that puppy on eBay.
I did. I migrated as well, Stephen. It transferred over because I've got it on my PS4 Pro now. And yeah, I heard rumors of like PS4 is going for like £1,000 more or something like that over here for any PS4 that had it on there.
Crap, I'll migrate all day. That's a business.
No, but I think there is a way, to Anthony's point, I think there is a way to hack it on now. You can do it if you really want it. So, yeah. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much all we've got for this week on VR Roundtable. Has anybody got any closing thoughts at all?
I'll just say it looks like I am dropping frames again on this episode. We had a technical issue last week. This is before I moved to a new version of Windows, so I don't know what the issue was last week, and I don't know what the issue is this week. My local copy is encoding just fine, so maybe it's my internet to YouTube. I have fiber. I have 1 gig up and down, so I should be able to stream at 4K 60 frames without issue. So I don't know what the issue issue is. I'll work on it this week. Just wanted to apologize for that. So if you're watching in the stream, it may be sort of a broken or a chuggy frame rate. It's not anything that I see that I'm doing wrong, but I just want to apologize for that. And I'll spend some time this week to fix it.
Hey, real quick in chat, Tech Neil says, hi, at VR Roundtable, will you guys be keeping your ear to the ground regarding the potential upcoming Madbox, a VR-compatible games console? And you know what, Tech Neil? We're going to get to it really soon, but first we're getting Soldier Boy's console first. We're going to check that one out, and then we'll check out the Madbox. Yeah, Soldier Boy. You ever heard he's got his own video game console now?
No.
Is that Madbox the one by the... is it Mad Studios? Project Cars?
Mad Studios.
Slightly Mad Studios. Okay, yeah.
More
I
power.
thought that was an April Fool's joke, actually, when I first heard it.
More power to them. If they can pull it off, like I welcome newcomers to try to compete. But Simon Jones says, quick update from Steve about Pimax. I've used it all week. It's still going good. I stand by everything I said last week. So there's been no shifts. There's been no fall off from the honeymoon period or anything. With the new Windows installation, I will say that Lucky's Tale runs perfectly fine. So it must have been some sort of bugaboo with all the crap I've installed and stuff over on my past installation. So Subnautica still has a weird shading issue, and I guess that game is just the way it's going to be. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but that is the only game I've had an issue with. Everything else is running real well, and I'm still very, 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 very pleased with the Pimax. When I stepped to play Ace Combat on the PlayStation VR, and I want to be very cautious, and you'll find a lot of YouTubers out there will be careful to make sure that they keep doing their Let's Plays with the Rift and with the Vive, even though they have other headsets, because they don't want to necessarily come off as they are. They want to cater to their audience, and so I don't want to be keep bringing up the Pimax necessarily, because I don't want to put people off that, oh well, he's playing things on a Pimax, he's got a different experience than everybody else, and to a degree that's true, but I don't think the Pimax is going to make a bad game play well. Like case in point, the flying game we talked about earlier. But it is a different experience, so I may not talk too much about it, and because I'm trying to not rub anybody the wrong way. So, I want to be sensitive to that, and maybe it's wrong, maybe I shouldn't do that, but it's kind of where I'm at the right point. I don't want to keep bringing it up because I still feel that it's sort of a niche, like an extra niche thing, and I don't want to be seen as I don't know, as just grating on somebody by continually talking about it. But I will say, since you asked specifically, Simon, that I am still enjoying it, and it's the only headset I want to use. Like, I felt it when I played Ace Combat 7 on PlayStation VR. Like, I was pushing the PlayStation VR mechanism slides in and out, and I was really pushing it into my face, because naturally I'm like, oh, this phobe isn't it, and it is it, and it's just the way it is. It's just a fact of what the device is. So there's that, and also thanks to Catherine Chanson for the €5 super chat. Thank you very much, and she says thanks for the best live VR show. We really appreciate that feedback.
Okay, yeah, well, I know we need to finish up here. Just very quickly, and this is just a thought, I should probably save it for behind the scenes, Steve, but I wanted to very quickly ask you, just because you did, somebody did bring up Pimax in the chat, I wanted to ask about the tracking. Have you had any issues with tracking? This is something that I read about from certain users of the Pimax in terms of it falling out from tracking from time to time. Have you got anything on that?
No, like it, the only tracking issue I've had, and it's not really a tracking issue, it's a Steam VR issue. Tracking is spot on. It's using Lighthouse technology. It works. This stuff is proven. It's spot on. I haven't had a single hitch or a single glitch. I have had a couple of situations where I've booted up to play a game, and for whatever reason, Steam VR put me into the standing room mode. So you see with the Pimax, you have the Pimax software, not unlike when you have the Rift software, Oculus Home, and both have to be running along with Steam VR. And when I turn the Pimax on and all that, and it then turns Steam VR on, for whatever reason, sometimes it puts me into standing room where you get the blue circle at the center of your room. And that's just a Steam VR thing. Like it's either the bug on Pimax side or the bug on Steam VR side, and you just turn it off, turn it back on, and then it'll put you back into your room scale mode. So some may describe that as a tracking issue because Steam VR is coming into the wrong tracking mode, because you can have the standing mode and the room scale mode both configured on one PC, depending on what type of game you're playing. So that's the only bug I've had, but I don't know who's at fault for that. And it's relatively minor because I just turn things off, turn them back on. And it goes back to what I mentioned last week, and that there's more friction to using a Pimax. Like, there's just little things that are going to creep in. And I think that stuff will work itself out as they get more development time with their software.
Okay, yeah. And finally, sorry, when we get on to Pimax, I've just got loads of questions anyway. But finally, Greg's VR, he did mention how's the vertical field of view in the Pimax? Is there anything you could tell us about that?
Yeah, it's about 6 degrees taller. So and I may have my numbers slightly wrong, but and just take it for the gist of what I'm saying is, from what I remember, I measured 94 degrees field of view on the Odyssey and on the Rift, and then I measure 100 to 102 on the Pimax. So that doesn't sound like a big change numerically, but it does feel like it fills your vertical field of view very, very nicely. And it is notable coming from any other headset. All the horizontal field of view gets all the attention, and maybe rightfully so, but there is an increase in the vertical field of view that is very immediately noticeable.
Okay, good stuff. Well, that's pretty much it then for this week on VR Roundtable, episode 109. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to everybody in chat. Thank you to Catherine Chanson for the super chat as well. Always appreciated, and anything we get from that always goes back into the show. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. We'll see you next time, and thanks for joining us.
Bye.